incredible, financial principle that works on money. There's just some things that we need to know about. So let's talk about compound interest a little bit. You might think, well, this is a little bit. Yeah, this one is not working, is it? It's because I hold it upside down or something.
I hoard my own.
Ah.
So check, see if that one works.
A nice wet one. Ah, look at that. All right. So they have what they call the rule.
Positive and negative.
Oh, okay, good. The rule of 72. Anybody know what the rule of 72 is? Rule of 72? Okay. Well, the rule of 72 is if you divide the interest rate into 72, you get the number of years it takes for money to double. Okay, so if you're going to invest money, you obviously want it to grow, right? So if you invest $1,000 in an account, okay, how long is it going to take to grow? So at 10% interest divided into 72, how long is it going to take to grow, to double? 7.2 years, right? Okay, so 9 would be 8 and so on. So if we take $1 here and we double it to $2, okay, and then double it to $4, this is going to be a logarithmic scale, just in case you're wondering what I'm doing here. Okay, and then we take 4 to 8 to 16 to 32. So that's one double, right? 2 doubles, 3 doubles, 4 doubles, 5 doubles. All right? Now, if you are 21 years old and you could get 10% interest and you could double your money every 7.2 years, how many doubles do you have until you're 70 years old, let's say? How many doubles do you have? Huh? So if we take 70, that's 50 years, and we divide that by 7, that's 7 doubles, right? So that means you've got 7 opportunities to have $1 go to $2 to $4 to $8 to 16 to 32 to 64, right? So that'd be pretty cool. If you had $1,000 and you just put it into that machine and you knew that when you reached this age it would be $64,000, that'd be a pretty cool thing, wouldn't it? Okay. So here's what a compound interest curve looks like. Sort of, maybe you've heard these referred to as a hockey stick. In other words, it's flat for a while, and then it gets steeper and steeper, and then it really starts to shoot up. So it takes 7 years, right? So if you're 21, so we'll make this now 28. $1 has now grown to how much? After one interval? To $2, right? Everybody with me? It's going to be, you have that test, right? Yeah. Okay. And how much of their grade is this? 80%. 80%, that's what I thought. Okay, so this goes to $2, right? And now if we go out to age what? What's the next interval? So add 7, 35, right? Now it's going to be worth $4, right? We go out to another interval, which is 42, right? So this is $8. Now we go out to another interval, which is 49, right? Now it's $16, 56, $32, and 64 at what? 63, huh? All right. So now what's interesting about this, to me, it might not be interesting to you, but what's interesting to me about this is that how long did it take $1 to get to $2? 7 years, right? Okay, so that added one more incremental dollar, right? Now between this in this interval, from this point to this point, we added how many dollars? We added $2, didn't we? So that means if we draw a line there, right? It only took half as long to accomplish in this second interval what it took a whole interval to do here, right? Okay, so now you've got, this is your $3 mark and your $4 mark. How long did it take over here to add one more incremental dollar? You didn't know this was a math class, did you? So 1/4, right? Right? It only took 1/4 as long. So here, now you've got your fifth dollar added here, and you've got 2 more before you get out to the 8, right? So now here for 8, now this is going to be, you know what? So this was 1/2, 1/4, 1/8, 1/16, and so on. So can you see the power of compound interest? I mean, hold 2 seconds and I'll get you. So what took a whole interval to accomplish in the beginning only took half an interval, only took a quarter of an interval, an eighth of an interval, a 16th of an interval, and so on. So now which one of those intervals would you rather be investing in? The ones up the curve, right, where it's taking a much shorter time in order to get your results. Yeah, your question.
I'm just a little confused. So the interest rate always stays the same. It's 10%.
Well, this is an assumption.
Well, whatever.
Yeah, this is there's interest rates in the real world do not stay the same.
Okay.
Okay, but in this assumption, I'm just showing you what happens if you keep it the same.
Okay. But like compound interest in this case, like the rate is always 10%.
Yeah, I'm using 10% across this whole spectrum.
So, but as the money is increasing, it's still 10% on that new amount.
Right.
10% on that new amount.
Right.
That's why it's
Right. That's where you're getting the compounding on that, right? Okay. So what took 7 years. Now, you know, if you think about money and you think about 10%, that may seem like a big number to you, or it may seem like a small number to you. Okay, you know, prior to 2000, which you probably don't even think about prior to 2000, but if you thought about prior to 2000, people in their retirement plans, their 401ks, were expecting to get 10, 12, 15% on their money every year, because the stock market had done so well. After the tech crash in 2000, when a lot of these internet companies went bankrupt, all of a sudden the stock market went way down, then took a long time to catch up, and then we had the crash in 2008 with the credit crash. And so, the stock market's only grown at about 2% over the last 10, 12 years, okay? So if we divide 2 into 72, 2% into 72, how long does it take money to double? 34 years. Now how many intervals do you have between now and your older age? Age 65 or something. Lucas, how many intervals do you have?
4.
See, that's what you get for talking, because I'm calling you. Just be that a warning to all of you. No. You only have 2 intervals, right? Okay? So the smaller the interest, what does that do to the curve? Now, you might be saying, when you walk out of here, that was the most stupid discussion on compound interest I've ever heard in my entire life. What in the world am I ever going to do with that? And you may never do anything with it, all right? But if you understand compound interest, and Benjamin Franklin says this is the 8th wonder of the world, it might be something worth knowing and thinking about when you invest your money in your Roth IRA or your 401k or wherever you might be putting money over the course of the next few years. Now, what's not obvious in this is where the danger is, okay? And this is why debt is so detrimental. Is it debt and detrimental? Okay, we forget. All right. Why debt's so bad, okay? And why budgeting is so important, and why setting money aside is so critical, okay, to you, is because you only have so many intervals, all right? Now, look at this. If we call this the chain of compound interest, you get to the second interval because you completed the first interval. You get to the third interval because you completed the first and the second interval. You get to the fourth interval because you completed the first, the second, and the third interval. In other words, your Disneyland ticket, on your e-ride, I guess they don't have those anymore, but it comes only if you stay on the curve. Okay? So here, let me show you how most retirement plans and savings accounts work. Okay? It works like this. You put it in, you put it in, you put it in, you take it out. You put it in, you put it in, you put it in, you take it out. You put it in, you put it in, you take it out. Okay, so here you're 21, here you're 28, here you're 35, here you're 42, and what interval are you in? You're 42 years old. You've put it in, taken it out, put it in, taken it out, put it in, taken it out. What interval are you in? Yeah, you're still in the first interval. See, you cannot get to the second, third, and fourth intervals unless you complete the first interval and actually hang on to it. So a financial principle that would be good for all of you to use and apply and cling to financially is when you save something, keep it saved. See, there's two types of savings accounts, all right? There's this type, which is called a put and take, all right? Put it in, take it out, put it in, take it out, put it in, take it out, a put and take account, okay? And then there's this type, which is a long-term savings account, all right? And this is one where you ride the chain of compound interest for a long period of time. And the problem with this, the problem with this one is that, you see $20,000, $30,000, $50,000 sitting in here and you say, well, I could buy a new car. We could take a trip to Europe. We could put a room addition onto our house. And so, you see that money in there, and there's this huge, siren call to do what? Spend it. I can't keep money saved. Spend it. Yeah, Aaron.
I have a question. So we started with $1.
Yeah.
If say we started with $8, would
Just multiply it.
would it be the 32 the next year?
Well, no, it would be 8, 16,
Yeah.
32, 64, 128, so on.
Okay, I understand.
Yeah.
We're sort of, so if I put more money in it, I should
Yeah.
just slide it over.
But that's a really good point, okay? Because, a lot of times we'll meet somebody who is 35 to 40, okay? They've already gotten started in life. They're married. They've got kids. They've already bought a house. They've already got their credit cards maxed, all that stuff. And they start thinking, ooh, I better get going on putting some money aside for retirement, or I'm only going to be living on my Social Security, which at your age may not even exist or may not come into play until you're 85 or something. Who knows how long they'll push the can down the road. But the point is that, at some point in time, most people wake up and they say, I got a problem. And see, my objective, and I know Mr. B's objective, is to wake you up now so that you're aware of this. Now, whether you do anything with it or not, who knows? But at least you've been told, sort of like evangelism. At least you know about Jesus Christ. Whether you make a decision that He's your Lord and Savior and turn your heart over to the Lord, that's a different issue. But at least you know about it. You've heard it. Okay.
Amen.
Amen. Hear that. Okay. So what happens is, instead of being 21, you're 42, right? And instead of starting with zero, hopefully, maybe you've got $20,000 saved, in a 401k plan, all right? So $20,000 then running through this might grow depending on how many intervals you have. So let's say you've got 4 intervals to age 65, okay? So 20 would become 40, would become 80, would become 160, would become $320,000, okay? Now, when you're at retirement, the rule of thumb for pulling money out of a savings account, okay, an investment account to live on, because what do? You work your whole entire life making a salary, right? And then you get to the place where you can't make a salary anymore. So, it's man at work, woman at work, right? Trying to create money at work. Does that make sense? Okay, so, if we if we draw a timeline here, here's our early years, mid years, and later years, all right? So we won't put ages on that necessarily. But here, man at work, man at work, man at work, accumulating money, out to here, and then at this point in time, converting that then to money at work, and so then money at work has to last until eternity, right, till death. All right, so the question is, how much do you have to have here in order to make it last here? Because if man can't work anymore, women can't work anymore, where's this money going to come from? So where's it going to come from? It's going to come from Social Security. It's going to come from, 401k, a Roth IRA, wherever it's going to come from. So this distribution rate is 4%. If you take more than 4% out of that account, you run the probability of doing this, in which case then here to here, you have nothing to live on. All right? So you can't outlive your money, or well, you can. You don't want to. So the question is, how much money do you need here? So if you have let's say that you had $500,000 built up, okay? And again, I think you can see, if you had 20,000 here and, and you let it ride at a reasonable interest rate and it actually grew over a period of time, you could, with that 20,000, maybe get it to 160 or, $200,000, something like that. So where's the rest of it going to come from? So you've got this much capital in place when you become, aware at age 42. Now, on top of that, you have to tack on this amount to get to whatever your target is, which is right up here. Okay, and now 4%. So, forgetting inflation, we could spend. There's so many different issues that keep cropping up as we talk here. But forgetting about inflation, what's a college graduate earn today, typically? 40,000 maybe? Is that 50? 50?
40, 50.
Yeah. When I got out of college with my MBA, what they were paying? $800 a month. So I think they're still paying that. Okay, so 50,000, so that's 4,000 a month, right? Okay, so $50,000. So that on 500,000, how much is that? That's at 10%, that's 50,000, right? At 4%, how much is it? You told me this was not a math class. It's 20,000, right? So at 4%, that's $20,000. Okay, so if you're used to getting 50 and your money's only going to give you 20, what do you have? A problem, right? So when we talk about budgeting, when we talk about savings, when we talk about planning ahead, can anybody see how relevant this might be? Huh? So even $500,000, which is a lot of money. That's our dear president talks about millionaires, right? And redistributing the wealth. Well, how much wealth do we have to redistribute? If we need that to create an income and not be dependent upon the government. See, so there's some conflict in that thinking and in those numbers when you start thinking about. So how much do you really need in order to do this at a 4% distribution rate? You really need what, about $1.2 million? No, what's $1.2 million? 48,000. So you really need about 1.2 million at 4%, equaling 48,000 to get there. So now if we back that up, and we've got some capital here, how much more do we have to put in order to be able to get it? It's simple math, but if you don't do that, if you don't know what that is, then you don't know where to go. Well, why am I bringing you through this, other than twofold? One is awareness, but the second is budgeting. The question was asked about budgeting, right? So if you know this is an issue, and you spend 100% of everything you make, because you have a rent payment, house payment, car payment, gasoline, all the things that go into living life, and you don't budget anything to solve this problem, then you're going to get out to age 42 or 45 and you're going to say what? Help, help. And there may not be any. Really. Because what is this right here? What is that right there? Well, it's your life, right, exactly. But we can't control it. When you run out of it, you run out of it. It's sort of like sand in an hourglass. As the sand trickles out of the hourglass, there's only so much sand left. So if you procrastinate and postpone dealing with this, which part of the curve are you lopping off? Aren't you? You're losing this part of the curve, So every year you wait, you're losing that part of the curve. And so you get down, and maybe you only have 2 intervals left, or 3 intervals left.
We hope you enjoyed this message. Biola University offers a variety of biblically centered degree programs, ranging from business to ministry to the arts and sciences. Learn more at biola.edu.